Hi y'all, it's Terry from Sisterhood of the Traveling Brush, and I want to show you today a finish that I really love, which is a faux granite. I first did it on the countertops in my kitchen, but you can definitely do it on furniture and other things as well. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. I use the Johnny Granite products. You can get it like at Home Depot or Amazon. I'll give you some links, or just go to johnnygranite.com. You don't have to use this, but I like trusting them, like with the Iron Core primer and their special top coats, and then they have minerals in the paints here that they use, but I do mix in the Dixie Belle paints with that as well. But what we'll be doing on this first coat, I did just want to show you that the kit comes with the roller and the sponges, and it doesn't come with 2 sponges, but you cut these. I had more than one kit, and this one was called Sicilian Sand, but we're going to use some of our own colors in there. But it comes with the roller. I'm working on an old Victrola, and I started painting on the bottom of that. I love using this to run the tape and the paper because you can switch out the tape. Since I just painted this yesterday, the bottom part, I like to use the yellow frog tape, which is for delicate, recently painted surfaces. So I'll have a link on there if you want to check that out. It saves me a bunch of time and effort. And they also send a second, like a foam roller with this, but I really like to use this flat, it's not a roller, but this Sure line thing when I'm doing my top coat, so I'll show you that in a minute. So what we're gonna start with, normally you don't prime. This is an old Victrola that belonged to my dad, and this does, lift up. I'll fix that and worry about the inner parts of that at another time. But it was very old and damaged on top, water damage and a lot of things. So I used the Dixie Belle White Lightning, which is like a TSP product, and cleaned until I was tired of cleaning. Then I sanded a little bit, and I worried about releasing tannins and things like that from underneath, and I think there are a little bit of brown spots maybe there. So I did use their Boss blocks out stains and stops bleed through primer on here. But if your surface didn't need that, the Johnny products don't require a primer. The Dixie Belle products don't require a primer. This particular top just required one because it's old and damaged. So probably won't be able to see my head from back here. I'm gonna use this Sherline roller pan, and then the Iron Core primer. Let me get these out of the way because all we're gonna do now is prime, and this is like a black primer. So you could, choose to use whatever product that you prefer. Like I said, I like this because it is a strong base coat. And the reason that I'm doing this on here is, now and then you have a piece that is going to have a high traffic surface. I have a little coffee shop here, and we keep our big commercial grinder on top of here, and the little, not condiment tray, but whatever you call it, the part that, let me just pour some of this in here. This has a smell to it. This is not, this is not your typical, what do you call it, chalky tops, like top paint. This is something that is meant to grab a hold of slick surfaces and give them a tough coat. I have knocked this off of here. This yellow tape is not that strong, but that's the reason that you use it, so that it doesn't damage your freshly painted finish underneath. But anyway, you don't have to buy that kit, but they do sell these paints individually. So if you just wanted to order this Iron Core primer and their top coat, I'll send you a link for the ones that came with this particular kit, or, the kit's easy, but you just cover the surface. So if you wanted to try this with regular black paint, I'm sure it would give you the same black finish and the same black look everywhere, but I don't know that it would give you the same type of tough surface protection that this gives. This door opens, it has an old Victrola record player in there, so it has these seams. I'm going to go this direction and get those seams. Normally you would go in the same direction all over. And this particular coat or this particular product needs several hours to dry. So this is a very tough base coat. This is really the important part of getting the protective finish at the end. It's not necessarily as important about getting the look. You can get the look with any paint you want. But if you really want it to be a tough countertop type surface, I definitely recommend this product. Sorry if this is gonna cut my head off here, but I wanted you to be able to see close enough up of how easy this is to roll on and how it almost looks like tar going on there. It doesn't feel like tar, but it looks like tar. I'm gonna roll it out. I use some tiny little dolly rollers. Absolutely love those two for being able to easily move this furniture around. If you're doing a very large surface, you may not want to go from area to area and just work, you know, from wet edge to wet edge in a typical fashion. But this is a very small piece of furniture, so I'm going back and forth, and then I'll go back and get my roller marks straight in the very end. The roller marks won't show too much in the very end because we do have about 4 more different coats that are going to go on here for this project, but they'll be sponged on and then go on at the very end with, for the top, the shiny top coat that makes it look like real granite. Did that again. Since I did my countertops, which was the first thing I did, and that all those videos are on YouTube. I think there's like 9 videos or something that went with that because I videoed the whole process in case anybody needed that info. But that, you know, you wouldn't want any sharp lines and edges on there because you want it to look natural, and in nature things generally don't have real straight lines going through it. So I'm overlapping just a tad when I'm coming back over this. Hello, I'm back. It's been 24 hours since we put the iron coat on. It's dry. You only have to let it dry for 8 hours, but I went home and came back at my work studio. So the next step is going to be dabbing on with the sponge the colors that we choose to use. We're going to go from darkest to lightest, and they're going to need to dry a little bit in between the coats so that we don't end up with you know, a muddy look on there. I have this ball of a sponge and I'm cutting it now into smaller pieces. We're going to go for different sizes and shapes on that. The This is our largest one. I'll use it for the darkest color. You can use a paper plate, whatever container that you have. These are called boats. You get them at the restaurant supply store. So I'm going to use a little boat. I'm going to use the chocolate brown first, then back to the pine cone, which is the color we have on bottom. Then I chose putty as my third color. And I still have the gravel road that I'm going to use to put a little bit of veining in the end. So let's get them all out of the way, but the one we need. I have a boat out for it already. Bite it in front of you. I normally would probably bite that to get that off. I love the brown family. This is a very nice one. Now this could be grays, browns, tans. It could be pinks, I guess, if you were wanting a pink granite. Anything that you want to do, and that's entirely too much. What we want to do is make sure that we have a little bit of space to onload and a little bit of space to offload the paint. I'm going to put this lid on and grab myself another boat just in case I need it to offload because I put so much paint. The technique that they teach you, if you were doing this for countertops, is to lightly go and do in a square motion, just a small, like a 2x2 area all over. The way that I like to do it, to give it a little bit of, I don't know, flair, I guess, and to give myself something to not be bored about. Okay, I've unloaded. Offload some. See about how much comes back off. But rather than go square, I'm going to think about where later I'm going to put the vein, and thinking I'm going to come in on this side and come over and around a little bit. So I'm going to, you don't want the pattern to show up too dark or straight lines or anything like that. So you turn it this way, that way, the other way as you're putting it on. Looks like that's not showing as well. I'm going to bring you a little closer. I'll get out of the picture and just point down to where you can see it. So I'm just thinking about where I'm going to want that veining to be later. Here's one thing you have to be careful of. I have a little bit of a swirl right here. That's because I twisted before I picked it up. So that may take a second. It always takes me a second to get in the groove. But you always want to pick it up before you twist it. I'm just sort of pouncing. When you're working on the edges, if this was to have a raised edge in back or anything like that, this one has a lower one, you want to sort of come over it and go, and so that you're not like having a separate one that ends here and begins there. So you want them to go over it in such a fashion that it starts on one area and goes into another. Okay, so now we have that marked down and we'll just fill in. I think they like you to give it a couple of hours in between coats to make sure that it dries good. You could also, you know, use your blow dryer, heat gun, heat tool, whatever, to get a little air on it, which I will probably do in a minute. wanting this first darkest color all over. See how that sort of just bends down over the edge there? Then we can fill back in with some more specks here and there. Having a little bit of darker areas, a little bit of lighter areas, that's all absolutely wonderful. I have this crease here, so I'm going to make sure and sort of go over it so that it starts on one end and ends on the other. Nothing has to be perfect because we are going to come over it with 2 more layers. We're soon going to lose track of this line that I put there, but I'll know it's there, and it helps me in my mind to know where I'm going to be going, and I believe that the fluidity of it lends itself to showing back up better for the vein later. When you go with the thinner pounces like this, where it's not as thick of paint going on, that does obviously dry a lot faster too, but it does look more authentic. Any texture that was on the surface a little bit showing through before I started this part is now camouflaged. It doesn't matter if you get it a little heavier on one end than the other or anything like that on your surface, because the natural look of the granite would also have been that way. Any of these areas that I feel like have too much of a puddle of paint, I'm sort of going back over as well to pick up some off of there and to blend a little. Looking back to see if I missed anywhere on the edges. And it's drying really fast in here, so this is not going to take long. Now I'm thinking about where was my original line through there, and I'm going to go make it a little bit thicker. Not with heavy doses, thick patches of the paint. Just filling it in to where you and I know it's there, right? Okay. Now you could dispose of this sponge. I will wash the sponge and save it. But that's the end of step 2. And as soon as this dries, I'm going to give it about 2 hours. We'll come back and I'm sorry about that. We'll come back and put step 3. And we're back. We now are going to the pine cone, which is the color we used on the bottom of the body to tie it all together. And we're going to do the same exact thing that we did with the chocolate brown. Is that what it was called? The chocolate? Yep, the chocolate brown. But this time we're using a smaller and different shaped sponge. Pour a little in. About that for not being wasteful. I don't know if that's going to be enough or not, but we can always refill it. And we're going to just do the same exact thing that we did the first time. And because I'm a weirdo that way, we're going to start back here, just like we did the first time as well. So the holes in the sponge are in a different pattern and all of that this time, so this will look a little bit different. Than the last one. Excuse me. Like I said, you can start in one corner and do the whole square there, however you want to do it. Or you can be weird like me and just have a good time with it. When I was doing the countertops at my house, I put WVU for my husband's favorite college football team. I put LSU for my favorite. I put our initials. You cover it all up later anyway, so may as well have a good time, right? That's the way I see it. Doing the same thing as I did before, coming up over that edge to tie it in together. Trying to remember to twist so they're not all just alike. In the end, when we finish this portion, only a small amount of the black will still show through. But it's important that we not cover it all up. And I just hold it by a little pinch of the end of the sponge. This sponge came with my Johnny Granite countertop kit, but you can buy that. You can buy it separately and not have to buy the kit. Or you can, you know, probably use some other sponge if you had it. This one, you know, specifically they picked out to have good granite mimicking qualities. I think it was $12 maybe. Going a little bit heavier than I did on the chocolate brown. For no particular reason other than I like this color to tie it in better with the bottom part. That you can do that however, you know, whichever of the tones and the colors that you like the most. When you start putting yours on, you can feel free of whichever layer it is to add more of that one. We're not wanting it to really look like leopard spots. That's why I refill, do a few here and there, and then go a little heavier back over it with pouncing with the lighter touch, offloading less onto it. Go around those edges. Make sure that some gets in each of these crevices. It's a pretty light touch that I'm using. I'm not going real heavy and then mashing it down really hard. That will give you too much of a dark spot. So you want to vary it up a little bit, but never be too heavy with how hard you push it down. Have to get out a little bit more. We shall see. Need to remember to turn that a little bit as I go around. I didn't do it enough right there. Definitely have to have a little bit more. Oh. Just a little. I'm only going to put a tad. For one, I'm only going to need a tad, but I'm going to have to offload in this same boat or get another one, because now I'll put them in together and that one's going to have it on bottom of it. So kind of go with the flow. Have another sort of crease there that I'm wanting to make sure and come come across. Getting the heavier ones while it has a new load on it, evenly distributed, and then gonna pounce the it all begins looking the same after a little while. Would be nice to play a little music. Remembering to lift before I twist. And just gonna check around these edges a little and make sure that there's nowhere that's crazy looking. Like right there, it's crazy looking. There we go. And that's it for this layer. Okay, I'm back, and here's what we have. Here we have the lightest color, which is the putty, Dixie Belle putty, and I have a little bit more of the pine cone out, a little bit more of the chocolate brown out, and it can get scary for a minute if you're not wanting to get too light with the lightest color. And I have another hunk of the sponge that's dry for blending in the end. So we're gonna do sort of the same thing that we've been doing with the lighter color. Go back with our same plan that we had from the beginning of marking out where our vein is going to be in the end. And I'm going to try to work a little bit faster this time, doing all the same exact stuff. So that we can blend a little bit with the lighter and the darker colors. I'm just going over first and doing all the things that I don't want to forget, which are coming around these edges, making sure to do that all in one piece. Switching out here and there, same thing going over my creases, and then just filling in. I'm just going to do small area by small area on this one to make sure that we can get the colors blended. making sure there's like a haze of it over the whole entire area. I'm going to set this aside. This is a fresh piece of the sponge that I have here, but I'm not going to get a whole lot on it. Just enough that the second color sort of tones down the last color a little. Come back with what was the first color, which was the chocolate brown, our deepest color, and lightly go over it again, doing the same exact thing. And this really helps to tone it down and get those colors to blend with each other just a little bit. This is when it really starts to look authentic. Now I'm going to come in with our blank sponge. And I'm just tapping. That really does look like a piece of granite. That just blows me away how that happens. Okay, see the difference in here as we move over, how that little bit of last minute touches makes a world of difference. We're going to do the same thing on the middle portion. The light can show up so much, so I'm really working hard to make sure that I offload some. Same thing as before, making sure that we go across any seams or edges and things like that. And then dab. See how just enough of the black still shows through to give it that marbly granite look, and it's darker there than it is here, and that makes it look more natural. So we're not going for an even consistency or anything. I got a few dabs right there that are heavy, but they'll blend here in just a minute, and then it'll be all right. It'll be a-okay. Remember where we're going through there? I'm gonna go back back over that just a tad to where it's a little bit more hazy through that area. Back to the middle color, which was the pine cone. See how we'll lighten up those splotches with that, and it makes them look more natural. I'm going to do the same thing here as far as being a little bit heavier with the haze. And I'm sort of just using my eyes to scout out anywhere where there's not a little bit of a splotch of this pine cone on top of that putty. Just going over that seam a little bit. Okay, now back to the chocolate brown. And the least amount of this one. Wanting to make sure and get in that crevice a little bit right there. Do it that way. Let me haze up in our area. Back with our blank sponge. And this is just to blend those colors in. Not exactly smear it, but sort of smear it. I'm dabbing straight down though. I'm not twisting in any kind of way once I'm down there. This step really does transform it. Same thing here. going around the edges like this really does help to offload any extra paint that's on your sponge. This is still very light-handed. But I do want to make sure and get in the creases and edges there a little bit to keep that looking authentic. Anywhere where there's a heavier spot, I just dab a few times over it to kind of spread that out. And then we know the next layers will blend it in. Making sure once again to get over the areas to sort of not leave it as a big splotch. Then to our chocolate brown. Again, I'm just trying to work pretty quickly. I'm going to leave some of that darker area through there. I'm not wanting to sort of blend everything, because the different light and dark areas give it that little extra something something. And now in with the blending sponge. I'm going to go ahead on in while that's still damp, because this is a little bit scary here. We're going to come in with the veining, and this color has not been used in here at all. It's not as dark as a black. We may put a little black too. And there's no rhyme or reason to this where it should go. If you don't even have to put it, you could be done right now exactly like that. But to me, this is the part that kind of can bring it over the top a little. I'm going to use use my smaller brush first. These are just artist brushes. This is a liner brush. This one is an angled brush. I want this semi-straight and semi-crooked, so we're wanting it to look like it was a crack in the finish. When you think about this, as you think about like a tree branch, it's going to be fatter at one end and narrower at the other end, and it can start and stop any place you want it to. I'm coming straight across because this is I wanted it to come across all three pieces, and this is the path that I envisioned when I first started. Okay, now your crack could split a little bit off this way. It could split a little bit straight ahead, thinking like a tree trunk here, and it doesn't have to. The split could be barely visible hairline through some of this area. Just sort of thinking about it like I would a tree, where it's going to kind of, a tree branch, kind of V out. And I want it a little wider down here in the beginning. It's not that visible going through there. I'm going to go a little bit, spread it out to the left and right, just a little bit with my angled brush. Those other layers are not dry yet, so if you push really hard down through there, it'll make a larger smear. Okay, I'm going to stop at that. I'm going to get a little bit of a darker color and like a black. Just using these same brushes, and I'm not even rinsing them out. This is called Caviar. I'm just going to go right out of the lid here. This can be as light, as dark, as detailed, as big, as small, as your imagination can come up with. trying to go in a very light touch in the center of the, was it putty? Of the gray part that we put already. Some of the areas of the crack would be darker like this as other minerals and things seep in. And some of it would be lighter. And here's the scary part. I'm going to try to tap at it. Better start at this end. It's so thick down there. We're trying to pull some of that up. And blend some of it down without smearing too much. Because you just want the faint idea of a crack. Come back into my lightest color. And I barely want to sort of haze around it. I'm going to do the same thing with the darker color, the chocolate brown. Being very light-handed. Now I'm going to come back with the blending sponge. that looks like a real aged crack. And we will let this dry and at least a couple of hours, and then we have the gloss top coat that will go on next. So see you when it's dry. Hi y'all, I'm back. It's dry, and we're gonna do the last couple of parts, or the first of the last, because it's gonna take 2 coats of this high gloss finish. I'm not always a fan of high gloss, but it looks really good on here and makes this look very authentic. I'm doing this part first because it's recommended that you let it soak into your roller for a minute or so before you start to get it good and saturated. So I'm going to get a good bit of it in there. Squishy my roller around in it a little bit and set this aside. The other part that we'll do before we put the top coat on is to sand it down a little bit to knock off any bumps or lumps or rough edges or anything like that. I'm just using a regular sanding pad for that, and just going very easy at it, just kind of making sure there's nothing raised or sticking out anywhere. I'm not doing like a hard sand or anything. I'm definitely not trying to distress or anything like that. As you know, mine has these seams in it. I will worry about that later because we're still going to, use this as openable and closable. Just using my hand to feel if there's any rub spot anywhere. Don't feel anything. I'm going to wipe the dust off of there with the little rag that I've got here, so that we'll get a good smooth finish with the top coat. A little bit of dust coming off on there. I always stain up my t-shirts, and then I cut them all up whenever I clean out my drawers, and I have just bags and bags of t-shirt pieces, which definitely come in handy for this kind of stuff. So I'm very happy with the faint line that goes through. And here we go. I'm gonna get off the excess. This goes on a little bit of a pale blue color, but it does dry clear. First thing I'm gonna do, because of the shape of this, gosh, I love those rollers, is just get this back edge. So that I can quit worrying about it. I got more than I needed on here, so I'm just going to take I'm not wanting any brush strokes on here, just going over this real quick to get the excess drips off of there. When you're rolling on this, you're going to try to roll from one side to the other staying in the same direction and raised up a little bit on the area where you're going over the next area, or yeah, and pushing more toward the area that you haven't done yet, so that any line of excess is always being pushed away to be used next. Looks very neon under this lighting. I want to get really good because this one has the crack through there. Very good on that. Because this is the protective coating that'll harden to make our surface not only look like real granite, but will, you know, protect it for all the things that we may sit on it. Okay. Trying to think of how to do that. Okay. I'm going to be raised up a little bit on the back and pushed down a little bit more on the front. You don't want to go back over it very much after you've got it started, because once it starts to dry at all, you'll mess it up. So that's about all of that we can do as far as going back over it. Trying to offload as much as I can. Do it again, a little more raised in the back where we overlap, and a little more down in the front. It's kind of hard to do it backwards. Again, this is a little stronger of a formula than would normally be with a chalky style paint. But we want it to be durable, so. I'm working to keep that line pretty smooth here. You can keep a sponge brush with you if you would like. One comes with the kit if you get the kit to work on these edges. See how it's already starting to dry clear in the back. Make sure and get it good in those crevices, even in the, you know, the indentations and things on the edges, because those will be areas where water or other things would accumulate later, and we want that surface protected. You have to be careful not to get any sort of drag with your roller. It really helps a lot for it to go on with that sort of blue tint, because it really helps you to see anywhere where excess has accumulated so that you can get that off. It takes 2 coats of this top coat, which you can sand lightly in between them or not. I did not on my countertops, and I may or may not, depending on how it looks when this dries on this surface. Okay, that's all for this portion. I will come back when this dries and we'll put on that last top coat and then take some pictures of the finished project. Hey y'all, I'm back. This has dried overnight with the first coat of the high gloss top coat on it, so you can see it's actually not high gloss, as you know, shiny per se. But I wanted to get the last coat of the top coat on it today. And this is what I called a sponge brush yesterday, but what's a foam brush is what it really should have been called. I got these at the dollar store this morning, the Dollar Tree. So it doesn't have to be expensive, and you can feel okay about yourself throwing this one away and not being wasteful. But I also had told you I was going to show you this, which is what I like to normally put my top coats on with, and I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but I'll find you a link for it. I love putting on top coat with that, and it fits real good in this little bucket. It didn't come together, but it looks like it could have. This is called a thumb pail, which is awesome because it lets you evenly distribute the weight there whenever you're holding this, and it's not going to collapse or anything, and your thumb just goes in it. And pretty smart little get up there. Let's get some of this in here. It's not going to take a whole lot. And then we'll let this dry I don't know, probably a couple of hours, and then it will be done. But then you need to wait at least 24 hours before you put anything on it. I would wait at least a couple of weeks. And just like with anything else, it takes about 30 days for, you know, any type of painted anything to be 100% cured. So that's going to be my recommendation, is to... This has a little bit of texture to it. At this point, you could use a brown paper bag or a very fine grit, something over 200 grit sandpaper if you wanted, to make sure that this has, let's go ahead and do it, that this has a little bit of grip power to it to take this second coat. Take a whole lot, because I know that doesn't sound great on the recording there either. So you just want it to have a little bit of tooth. For this next coat. Go back to my hunk of t-shirt. And we'll go from there. I'm going to do this. I'll make sure this is good in here for you. This back edge first. This is like I was talking about yesterday, but I did it with the other brush. These foam brushes are awesome for getting into the crevices and things here. So I definitely, you know, this is not my ideal choosing of a brush in most instances, but in this instance it's fabulous. Fabulous. Perfect for it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go, because I have this crease right here, I'm going to go ahead and get it in that with this brush as well, because that makes it convenient. And then you can see how this has a magnet that would hold this if there was any metal on the ferrule there. I'm just gonna try to get in that other one I have on the floor there. You could, you know, put a lot more in here, of course, than I did. I'm just gonna tilt it forward and get myself some. This filled it about halfway up. Probably would have been good to let it sink in for a minute the same way we did on the other one. But here's how this goes. This yellow tape is awesome for what it does, not tearing up my paint finish underneath, but it gets on my last nerve. I'm just sort of rubbing it on because I did get a lot on here this time. But then this just goes straight across everything. I just love it for applying top coat. There's very little room for me to get around this piece and have the camera up there for y'all too, so excuse my hobbling. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and let it fall off of these edges and come back with the little sponge foam brush at the end and get that off. This type of top coat is a little bit different, a little bit thicker, a little bit different type of consistency than, say, the gator hide from Dixie Belle, which is what I normally put, which is a water resistant top coat. But it doesn't, there's, you know, not as much shine to that, so it's not going to make the granite look as authentic. So I'm going to go with exactly what the Johnny Granite people recommend on this. You don't have to have this little bucket for this thing. It would have been very easy to be going up a traditional roller right now. Roller, not roller, but roller pan. But I didn't have one in here. Okay, I'm going to make sure I'm holding it flat now, because I was trying to pull any excess over, but it's getting to the point where it's starting to get tacky. So enough is enough on that. Let me grab my foam brush again. Make sure that there's not build up here. Just kind of fade that in. Sorry, my big old head's in the way. I've allowed a decent amount of dripping to happen on these edges so that I can just get that in the crevices and fill that in with this brush now. I'm being very, very light with that. Let me come back over that in just a second. I want to make sure and get around this edge where I left a bunch of extra drips as well. These will start drying sooner. Easy, easy. you can see how, or you can feel with your brush how durable this finish is going to be. That's what makes me really proud of it. Other than it, you know, it looks pretty and it's different, but it really gives you something if you're doing this for a customer or, you know, a family member or something like that. You know that this finish is going to hold up. This is meant to be a kitchen countertop. And you know how much abuse those get. Okay, that's it. This is going to dry and this will be done. I'm going to let it I'm going to pull this off, finish the decorative parts of the front of it and the back and the sides and all that, and get it looking good while I'm waiting now. And then it will be ready to go back out and be put into use, because it will get heavy use here in the coffee shop area. I won't put it out there for 30 days. I don't want it to get, you know, I don't want to do all this work and put this effort into it and then have it, you know, something happen to the finish later. So you would definitely want to think about that with your customers too. If you're doing this for a client, you could be doing it for yourself, but you know, you don't want to put this much time and effort into doing something different and then damage it because you don't have the patience later on. So I would give it at least a couple of weeks before I'm going to stage it after 24 hours, then take all that stuff back on it, put light things on it after a couple of weeks, and then, you know, treat it like the surface that it is after the month. So if you have any questions, just let me know, and thanks for watching. Hi y'all, the piece is dry now and finished. I think it turned out great. If you have any questions at all, feel free to contact me at Terry at Sisterhood of the Traveling Brush. I do a lot of videos. I would love it if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find me on Facebook at Art by Terry Stovall, or on Instagram at sisterhood _of _traveling _brush. So thanks a lot, and I would love to see if you do some projects using this finish. I would love it if you would share them with me. Thanks for watching. Bye.